does that intersect, or what would be the advice in terms of brand presence? How do you take what you're doing and tell people about it, tell your audiences about it, but not come off as,
self-serving.
Yeah, self-serving.
I get asked a lot about the risks of a company communicating its corporate social responsibility, its sustainability strategy. First of all, if you're not communicating it to consumers, to your millennial employees, to your female employees who care deeply about this, to new markets into which you're trying to enter, you won't get the credit. You won't get the reputational enhancement. You won't get the brand differentiation. Companies have to talk about it. What is happening in our society, or probably what has historically always happened, is we have this odd tendency as human beings to, when a company steps up and says we're doing something, to find 16 ways in which they're not doing something. My response is, look, sustainability is never going to be an end game. We're going to always have to improve our strategy, evaluate our strategy, sort of shift or pivot on our strategy. And we're in a world today where companies are getting criticized anyway. Global companies are one of the least trusted entities to operate in society's best interests in the average person's mind. So they're already getting criticized. They have a choice. They can get criticized around things that they are trying to do well, or they can be criticized for not doing anything. So if they're not communicating any of their sustainability strategy, the general assumption is they're not doing anything.
Any other advice that you would give to whether you're a startup or a big company in terms of sustainability and social impact?
I call it age-appropriate sustainability. If you're a startup, you don't have a lot of resources lying around. You don't have a huge amount of employees. You don't have a lot of power as a small company right out of the chutes if you're not truly a social impact-oriented company. There are a lot of startups who are, focused from the start on social impact. Revolution Foods being one of them, founded by two women, probably a correlation there. But if you're a big company, I think it's absolutely incumbent on you to see the power that you have in the world and how you can harness that power for good. So water is top of mind issue for everybody right now, particularly in California, given our drought. If Coca-Cola does not work on solving our water scarcity issue, they're going to run out of a product. Coca-Cola is coming from water. They have invested heavily in developing water purification systems, water filtration systems, so that they can go out there and improve the standards of water, not only water from which they're drawing, but water that is serving a community in an underdeveloped world. It makes sense. It's a fit for them. There's a business reason, and there is an environmental and social reason, and that's the perfect mix.
Talk to us a little bit about how CSR has evolved.
It used to be one single person who was responsible for the green team inside of the company, or for EH&S, Environment, Health, and Safety. So the rest of the employees would probably naturally say, this is not my job. This does not affect me. There's somebody over in the environmental office who's managing this, so why should I do it? It's really evolved in the sense that, it's been put on to leaders' agendas. They've talked about how the company has the ability or is contributing positively to the environment. But more than that, they've set sustainability goals, which are very visible, measurable. And a company like Intel now looks at every employee and said, your job is to do your traditional job, which is to produce product or, manage our operations. But your job is also to contribute to our success at meeting our environmental goals. It's just now, it's expected. It's not effective use of resources to siphon this off into the foundation. You're not going to get very far.
Does it not only then expand, I'm thinking of Starbucks, does it not only expand markets, but also in a positive environmental way?
It absolutely expands markets. I mean, you have folks who jumped over to Starbucks because they were one of the first coffee companies to look at fair trade, to look at paying their coffee growers a fair wage. And it makes sense. If a coffee grower in, let's say, Costa Rica is not being paid a fair wage, that coffee grower is not going to be as productive as a coffee producer, as a bean producer. They're not going to provide as high a quality of bean than a producer who's struggling to make it in society, who can't afford housing, who can't afford health care, who misses days on the job, whose crop suffers because of simply lack of ability to spend all of his or her time on that crop. even speaking of the agricultural sector, we have a population situation in the world that it's projected that we're going to be feeding 9 billion people by the year 2050 with the same Earth's resources. If you give a woman in the developing world equal access to seed, training around farming and production and land, which is a big issue for women in the developing world, a female farmed crop outproduces a male farmed crop. That's something that we need if we're going to be feeding the amount of people that we are projected to need to feed by 2050.
Does that then become one of the brand pillars? Not just, again, something that they do just because they have to do it, but because it is part of what their brand represents for certain companies.
I do think brand is so front and center for consumer-facing companies. We've had a shift in recent years where brand used to be significantly connected to what we call tangibles, the share price, the financial performance of the company. Today it has moved significantly into intangibles, reputation, treatment of employees, treatment of workers in the supply chain. And when you have that shift, corporate social responsibility doesn't predict all of brand success, but it is starting to predict a larger percentage of brand positive reputation or negative reputation. So brands love it. If you have an example of Whirlpool, who has a really deep strategic partnership with Habitat for Humanity, and if I'm going to Sears to shop for a refrigerator, that's not a very differentiated product. They're all heavy metal, cold objects. But if I see a Whirlpool refrigerator in that lineup and they have a sign on it that talks about their partnership with Habitat for Humanity, it's a natural shift to say, I want to support this brand. It's still going to be cold. It's still going to be a functional refrigerator. It still has a freezer, but I get this added feel-good effect of supporting what the company is supporting. This is what CSR does to a brand, is it connects with the consumer more on an emotional level. And we can talk about how critical data is for predicting human behavior, but emotional connection predicts brand, predicts connection every single time over more traditional data-based strategies.